Joining the 25th. Do anything like this? Yeah, turn the volume down. Yeah, we've got a few people joining on Zoom, and this is going to be recorded. So if there's anybody you know who wasn't able to make it tonight, you can, we'll send out a link to the recording later. So just want to introduce Richard. Many of you know him, some of you don't, but you'll see a lot more of him around, fortunately. Richard's a community scientist and plant ecologist. Although he's new to Bishop, he's been studying big sagebrush, dendrochronology, and greater sage-grouse habitat in the region for years. He's worked alongside National Park Service, BLM, and USGS folks, and now works for Caltrans as a data analyst. Richard has a bachelor's and a master's degree from Cal State Northridge, where he focused on plant ecology and remote sensing. He then spent 3 years as a research assistant at Boise State. But Richard's passion has always been for community science. And so he has volunteered for the Xerces Society's Western Monarch Count as a volunteer coordinator and ambassador. And tonight, Richard will discuss community science work with the Western Monarch butterflies of Saline Valley. Thank you. I'm gonna make this disappear. That's fine. Cool. Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Richard Rachman. Pronouns are he, him, his. Today I'll be talking about monarch butterflies, Saline Valley, and you. If you're interested in the Western Monarch count, please, with your phones, take pictures at any time. I don't mind. But these QR codes will pop up sometimes. This is the QR code for the Western Monarch count website with Xerces Society. You can see where in the Western United States the overwintering sites are. Xerces Society is very open about that data. You can see the data, you can see updates, a lot of cool stuff. So please use your phone, take a picture of that, and it should pop up on your screen to that website. And, oh, this is so bad. Maybe at the bottom. Seems like a bottom thing. Okay. And thank you to Stu Richardson and Rachel Laura and the staff and volunteers at Xerces Society. Stu is the volunteer coordinator for Saline Valley. I used to be the volunteer coordinator for Los Angeles County. And then Rachel is doing her PhD in Arizona currently, but working with Fish and Wildlife and basically re-kickstarted the Monarch count here. And I used a bunch of her slides as well for this presentation. Okay, so what am I going to be talking about today? So first, I'll tell you about monarch natural history and their migration. Super cool. I'll tell you about how I got into this. I'll tell you about Saline Valley and the history of the region. I'm going to go and try to convert some of you into monarch monitors and teach you the survey protocol very loosely. There's a bit more involved in it. And then I'll talk to you about what plants you can plant in your yard that'll help monarch butterflies. And I think what I'm going to say with that, I think will surprise you. Okay, so you might have seen some of these figures that I'm about to show you before. Monarch butterflies, very large butterflies, super beautiful, toxic because of the milkweed they eat as larvae. They need this milkweed in order to get through the larval stage, which isn't very long. It's just a few weeks, right? 11 to 18 days. Then they turn into a chrysalis. Super beautiful. Like sometimes it has like a gold shimmer to it. And that's just a few weeks. And then they live as adults. And that'll be like a month or so. And then they'll die. And they do this 4 or 5 times, 5 generations a year. And so the one that the monarch that we most care about is the last generation, the one that lives 6 months. It's kind of miraculous. They have stronger wings, they have larger wings, and the adults are able to live for this like sustained period of time in a sexual diapause, not breeding. I'll talk more about that like cessation of breeding, but their life cycle is normally very short. But this last generation that does this really long migration, it's a pretty long time. So this migration, right? So pretend like the Rocky Mountains are kind of the split. We have the Western monarch west of the Rocky Mountains, then we have the Eastern monarch on the east of the Rocky Mountains. And the famous Mexican populations in central Mexico, that's the Eastern monarch, right? There might be some crossover. Some of the Eastern monarchs are suspected to be coming over to the West. They're not very different genetically, but they're different in their behavior. So they're not different subspecies of the Western and the Eastern monarch. Same species, same subspecies of migratory monarch. But they are doing it in different places. And so the Western monarch, it's going to be spending a lot of the summer months in places like Idaho and Utah, Nevada, and then it's going to be coming all the way to the coast of California, except for Saline Valley, all the way to the coast of California in places like Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Monterey Bay, even Los Angeles, all the way down to Baja California and up north in past San Francisco. And they're going to be spending their winter, that 6 month period, on trees, just hanging out, not breeding. It's like 4 months, but so it's kind of in their how are they doing this? A lot of it's magnetism within their nervous system, uh, changes in sunlight availability. They're using wind patterns in order to navigate across the landscape. And then once they get close enough to the sites, it's suspected that they're getting to their overwintering roosts through chemosensing. So chemicals left by their great 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 grandparents, um, sometimes to the same trees. So really, really incredible stuff. So once they're at these clusters, these roost sites, right? If it's 55 degrees or lower, they're just hanging out there, and it makes them really easy to count, right? Once it gets above 55 degrees, sometimes like up to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, then they start flying. They'll fly for nectar, they'll fly for water, um, and if there's milkweed close by, which usually at these overwintering sites there's not, but if there is, sometimes they'll fight and they'll mate, and try to lay eggs and stuff on the milkweed. Typically they don't. Typically there's not milkweed close to these overwintering sites. Again, they're in a sexual diapause. They're not breeding. The females will have what are called spermatophores on them. Sometimes they're gravid, meaning it's kind of the female insect equivalent of pregnant. And then they're just waiting to lay, once the overwintering period's over, waiting to lay those eggs on milkweed. But they're conserving energy. They're not fighting, they're not being territorial. They're just waiting it out until they can lay eggs and die. Okay, so how did I get involved in this? My background's in plant ecology. I've been studying wildfires a lot in botany, worked with like scorpions and wood rats. One of my big passions is teaching community gardens about like different weeds that they have in their spaces. I did this a lot in Los Angeles. I take queer people on hikes and teach them about wildflowers, women's groups, foraging groups, people that I think are marginalized out of these natural history circles typically, but can benefit the most from knowing who their neighbors are and plants and animals. And my favorite plant is sagebrush. I've been studying it for a really long time. It's how I got into plants. There's me posing with one. But so like people around Los Angeles were knowing that I was doing these talks. I was obsessed with research. I was leading these wildflower hikes. And someone from the San Diego Zoo reached out to someone for one of my friends at a water group. It was like, "Hey, Richard, we know you like talking and teaching and doing all this weird stuff. Would you be interested in like taking over as Los Angeles County Monarch coordinator?" I'm like, I don't know anything about monarchs. I know a lot about milkweed. And milkweed's pretty cool. So let me like jump into it. And so I did. And if this picture overwhelms you, just imagine how I feel. So almost immediately, I'm doing interviews with NPR, Fox News, LA Times wrote an entire piece on my work. Um, the Globe and Mail, which I guess is the largest newspaper in Canada. Didn't know that. It doesn't show, but Chevron Oil is on there. I had to collaborate with them to get access to one of the Monarch sites. The Getty Villa was really difficult to get access to. At one point, Doritos retweeted like a training I was doing using Doritos. Um, Yeah, so like what I would tell people is they look like Doritos and they're about the same size. Like go buy a bag of nacho cheese Doritos and you'll see. But I'm organizing students from UCLA, from community colleges in South LA and Long Beach to go do these counts. And it was just a lot of networking, a lot of talking, and I loved it. But it was a lot. Then I kind of like dropped off as I got more into research, especially in Idaho. I did some monarch work up there, but so that's how I got into teaching people about the surveys and how do you count monarchs with binoculars. But so why do we do this? Like why do we go to these overwintering sites where they're in sexual diapause and count them? Well, it's because they're really easy to count when they're just hanging out there. The second they start moving, there's multiple of them. You could do recounts. It's hard to estimate how many there are. And we know they're migrating to these spots, so we know they're migratory monarchs. We can differentiate them from perhaps residential urban monarchs that are hanging out in cities all day long or all year round. So we teach people on how to count these monarchs when they're clustered like this. And it's different. In Mexico, they coat trees, the pine trees there. And so they often, when you see counts, it's in hectares. So it's how many hectares are covered in monarchs. They're at risk in Mexico right now because of things like avocado farming, deforestation, cartels. It's a pretty bad situation for even monarch scientists. But that's how they're done. In the West Coast, there's a lot fewer. There still used to be a lot of monarchs, but there's way less than in Mexico. And we usually typically, if it's a site that has a ton, like in San Luis Obispo, it's in chunks. Like you'll see like a group of 100 and you'll kind of recognize what that looks like and you can go 100, 200, 300, 400. In Los Angeles it would typically be like fives or 20s. I'd be like okay, 5, 10. In Saline Valley it's just one. Like you can kind of identify them pretty easily just one by one, and sometimes they're in clusters, but the clusters are about like 3 to 5 individuals. And we count them mostly around now. 3 weeks around Thanksgiving, and then 2 weeks around New Year's Eve. So we have, but now Xerces has retitled them into an early season count, a mid-season count, which we're in now, and a late season count. I think this is a good time to say this now. Well, actually, I'll wait until more data. Okay, so the saline count. I told you it's like typically one by one monarch. Let's talk about Saline Valley. Not all of you have been out there. Um, it's not that far from Lone Pine. It's I measured it on Google Earth. It's 13 miles away as the crow flies. I can tell you it is not that easy to get to Saline Valley. It takes about a 3-hour drive through North Pass. And that's safely. You can do it maybe faster than that. I wouldn't recommend it. But Saline Valley, most of it falls within the jurisdiction of the Death Valley National Park. These large mud flats are kind of everywhere. There's like Saline Lake is out there. It's a very salty environment, super beautiful. And so a lot of our drive was very slowly on these like kind of bumpy roads. One of our volunteers that was going to join us popped a tire. And in these canyons in the Inyo Mountains are the monarchs. And it's hypothesized that there are more than the 3 canyons that we mostly count, but it's Hunter Canyon, McElvoy, and Willow Creek Canyon. And it's probably more canyons than that, but those are the 3 main ones that we've been finding. And they are incredible places. So McElvoy has this big waterfall, lush with vegetation. Sometimes it's so much vegetation, it's hard to even get through the canyon of mesquite, creosote, willow, coyote brush. It's really an incredible environment in these canyons. Definitely a temperature shift. So the valley might be like 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The canyon might be much cooler than that. And it's a stable temperature too because of all the water and all the vegetation. So whereas the valley floor is going to fluctuate wildly to 30 degrees at night and then up to 80 degrees in the daytime, the canyons just kind of stay more or less the same temperature. And so um, Saline Valley and Death Valley at large has been and continues to be the home of the Shoshone people. Uh, they were using a lot of the plant material that was in these canyons seasonally as dwellings. And so you can see a picture here taken by I believe by an ethnographer of such a dwelling with vegetation that you most likely can find at Hunter Canyon at McElvoy and such like that. So these were like seasonal places that uh, the indigenous people were going to and continue to be going to this day. The national park more or less rounded them all up and when the park was being developed and excluded them from most of the park. Um, there was some areas that were continuing to be farmed into the 1930s. There's this really cool passage that Stu and I found of a group of indigenous people selling to some of the miners that they were harvesting 100 acres of fruits and vegetables at the mouth of Hunter Canyon, which is just super cool. So what looks like a really like desolate place. How could anyone be out here? People have been there for a really long time. Initially, the national park tried getting them into these like really inhospitable dwellings, even in the hottest months of summer. And these are nomadic people that constantly are shifting from one area to the other based on resources. And they fought for the right not only have a presence in the park, but to return to some of their ancestral homelands. So they've been monitoring monarchs for thousands of years. So if you want to talk about the history of the count, they're still doing it. And their monarchs are an important part of their culture. There's even butterflies on their protest banner right there. Not monarchs, but. And of course, mining in the late 1800s and the 1900s. Pretty much all the canyons in Saline Valley had like pretty deep mining history, going right for the pun. But things like talc, salt, copper, gold, silver were all kind of fair game. Willow Creek was a pretty big mining complex that was boom bust that didn't last very long. But they were also noticing monarch butterflies in the winter period as well. So kind of continuing this idea of even though they weren't intentionally doing the count, they were there. And then we get to Durham Giuliani, who's an entomologist that passed away around 2010, I think. But he lived in Big Pine? Yeah, he lived in Big Pine. And he has a ton of insects named after him. This is one that I found off of Wikipedia, but strangely, the spelling of his name is different on the research article named to describe the species than everything I've seen from talking to people in the White Mountains Research Center and Stu and Rachel. The article's now, I think, like 40 or 50 years old, so maybe it's a little too late for a retraction, but um, I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was interesting. But Durham did a ton of surveying, 30 years of surveying starting from 1978. He was going out there. He led a CNPS Bristlecone chapter walk. I don't think in Saline Valley, but he's led them before. He's a naturalist with a ton of history knowledge about different plants and animals. And um, he collected a huge amount of data on Saline Valley. So if you don't think you can do the Saline Valley count, but you're like, hey, I'm pretty good with Excel, let's talk because there's a huge amount of his data that we have access to that we could use help like sifting through and making some good figures and such. So if you're interested in this kind of historical natural history, let's talk. But he surveyed one or two times a winter, mostly surveyed three canyons, though Stu's pretty sure he surveyed Paiute Canyon as well. And he documented over 1,000 monarchs. And at one point in one of his notes, he talks about having 300 monarchs that are tagged with little stickers, which is pretty normal for monarch science. But he let them go at Saline Valley. At least that's what he wrote. So he was releasing a lot of tagged monarchs as well. What happened to those monarchs? I would love to know. I suspect they made their way to Los Angeles, but he wrote in one of his notes that monarchs from Owens Valley were ending up based on their magnetic pole direction, were ending up between Ventura and Malibu, which there's overwintering sites there, especially by Malibu. So really interesting to think about that he was doing all this work. he was also recording when monarchs were first showing up in Bishop too. And this is from his notes that I kind of screenshotted, but the importance of the spring equinox, which is really cool. So when the spring equinox comes around, so think of Durham's work and think, okay, the monarchs are showing up in Bishop right now. Um, so 88% of monarchs are showing up between March 3rd and April 3rd. And then about over 50% just between March 15th and March 26th. So super cool stuff. I can answer questions at the end. Um, and so past surveys, like after Durham passed away, there was a few surveys, but Rachel was the one who really got things kick-started and then got Stu involved. And they did a really, and some of you were at this survey, but 34 volunteers. They had 5 different canyons, 12 survey teams. And they saw about over 100 monarchs, 145 monarchs. They even tagged some. And this is really where we are today, like continuing this year after year. And I'll talk about how the survey went this year. And Stu is currently in Saline Valley right now doing a survey. So fingers crossed that we get more. But yeah, this was like the height of volunteers. Like I think this is the most volunteers we've ever had. And it's kind of been a slow decline since then. If you're interested in getting involved and have a four-wheel drive vehicle, take a picture of this QR code, sign up, get on the list. Bart did it too and can tell you about how much fun it was. Yeah, and we'll talk about the protocol in a sec. But this website's really good that Rachel and someone else have been working on. I think their information's on the Who Are We Are section. But great website. Please get involved. Email Stu and tell him you want to get involved in the count. We still have time this year if you want to go out to Saline Valley. This year, we saw 75 monarchs at Hunter Canyon at, like Bart said, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then later in the afternoon, at noon, we went to McElvoy and saw about 15 monarchs. And that was the mouth. That was even before we got into the waterfall in the back. And it was just the 3 of us, Stu, Bart, and myself. We have, I think CDFW is there right now with Stu, last I heard. And we might have more volunteers going out. We're not sure. But so far, that's our number. Um, a, a Yeah, that'd be awesome. So around 100 probably monarchs, if we want to round that number out. And I did just get an email, and some of you might have gotten this email too, for the Western monarch count for the state. We're currently about 8,000, 9,000 Western monarchs. And that's mid-season, and mid-season is usually pretty indicative of how the count, it should be one of the high points of the count. To me, that's a little sad and shocking. 8,000 monarchs, Western monarchs in the entire world. Because in 1997, we were at 1.5 million. And I'll talk more about kind of the grand scheme of monarch counts with the data. So here's that. I definitely need that up here. Oh, stop it. Technical difficulties. Okay. So, like I said, we were at over 1 million in 1997. And so this is without Inyo County, this data set. And so going through time, huge crash. A lot of things have contributed to that. One of the worst years was 2020, where we counted just 1,900 or so monarchs. And the year I started, 2021, huge increase to 250,000. Everyone was telling me, like, you won't see any monarchs in Los Angeles, and then we find a ton. But it was really cool. And then we went up, and then we went down, and then last year was pretty bad. Last year was about 10,000, and now this year is heading towards that direction as well. So 2 pretty consistently bad years. Okay, but what about Saline Valley? While you're all here, the counts are way less, but this is just Xerces Society data. This is just data that Rachel and Stu has been collecting, right? So they weren't doing the count in 1997, so the zeros, right? So Rachel starts doing the count, they get 140 something, And then they had a really good year, over 750 in 2022, I think that was. And then a poor year. And then this year's, I think, slightly better than last year. So my question is though, what did the count look like before that, like during Durham's work and such? And so what I did was I collected, okay, so sites seem to be really specific. So I collected site data. So we mostly monitored it at Hunter, and that's where most of the monarchs are. And then also counted how many times we were at Willow and McElvoy. And then I did something called Bayesian analysis. So Bayes analysis, you can't see that, but it's basically the probability given prior information. And in this case, my prior information was the rest of the count in the state of California. And so it's very site specific and it's very year specific. So I plugged those variables into my model. And then I separated the three main sites. Now, these are just estimates, given what we know about Saline Valley. What did it look like going back into 1997? And my model, just a prediction, right, was saying, oh, there's probably like over 5,000 monarchs, which is like really optimistic. I was like, cool. But like to me, the most interesting thing was like around 2011, 2012, my model was predicting that there was an increase and it was kind of modest. It was an unbelievable number, like less than 1,000. And I could believe that. Then that's based on the rest of the state of California, right? Given prediction. And so when I took some of the data out for my model and then plugged it back in to see how well my model was predicting what we already know, it did okay. It was like, it's kind of hard to tell from this, but my model was, given how crazy Monarch data is from year to year, it was pretty accurately predicting how the numbers were going to be within like 100 monarchs, which is not very good, but still kind of interesting. But then someone actually did give me the rest of his data. So I was able to then use his data, but I did my whole Bayesian analysis kind of first. And I'm like, okay, now I can see how good my model actually is. But it's really fascinating because it never really gets over 1,000. Even going back to 1997, which is a really good year, that's one of these, this spike right here. It never really gets that crazy. It did get over 800, over 850 over in 1990 or 1989. But so that's probably how many monarchs at the peak were using Saline Valley. And that probably makes sense. So even when the numbers in the state were like well over 1 million monarchs, there's probably only really at the top, maybe 1,000 monarchs. Most of the time when people go to Saline Valley and do counts, I think bird people can appreciate this. It's zeros. And the zeros are good data. Like most of the time when Durham was going there, he was recording nothing or just a few monarchs. Like, but it was very small numbers. And then occasionally you get gangbuster years that are like 850. But zeros matter. That tells us that's the pulse of how monarchs are doing in the rest of the United States. So just to match up how my predictions were doing, so Durham passed away in 2010, and so you have this like absence of counts. So it's possible that this kind of peak in 2011 is just missing data. Otherwise, the model is not very accurate. It was a cool kind of thought experiment to kind of get through it. But super glad for his previous work. So it is funny you ask that. So then I got climatic data from Prism. Oh, it was cool. Your brain went straight there. There's no relationship, it seems like, between monarch numbers and drought and precipitation in the Western United States. It seems to be much more complicated than that for all these fluctuating numbers. Why are monarchs really good in some years and bad in others? And why are we in such a spiral right now? I can give you a few things: deforestation, pesticide use, especially insecticides, things like neonics, loss of milkweed habitat, uh, people raising monarchs and releasing them that aren't entomologists. It's probably contributing to OE, which is a protozoan. So then we have parasites that are kind of wreaking havoc on monarch populations. I think climate is in there, precipitation and temperature are in there, but the story's a little more complicated. Okay, so now you're all jazzed up. You're like, oh, I got to get involved in this. I got to help Monarch science. Okay, so let's talk about the survey protocol. So here's one on a creosote that's kind of cool. I'll talk about equipment, the protocol of how you do the survey, and I'll talk about everyone's favorite thing, plant ID. Okay, so equipment. This thing called Survey 123 on your phone. It's super easy. You can download the forms for Survey 123. We have paper forms if you're like, ew, cell phones. Um, you will have no service out there unless you have like Starlink or something. It helps to have some way to measure temperature and wind. I know folks have a lot of different kind of methods to do that. We're using something called a kestrel. I don't know if anyone here has heard of that before. Anyhow, hiking shoes are pretty important. I mean, sometimes these aren't really hiking shoes, but sometimes I was wearing these. But like pretty good boots that can handle even some water. Camping gear, things like tent, sleeping bag, sleeping pad. It gets cold out there. Having headlamps, lights, because you're going out at sunrise, and a four-wheel drive car. Like, look how the North Pass, when we went out there, how snowy it was. You need a pretty hardcore vehicle. It's so close to Owens Valley, but again, it's so far away because it takes 3 hours of slowly crawling to get there. Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then you need a pair of binoculars. I use Monarchs. I think they're Nikon. Um, but you might have your own preferred. So you're waking up before sunrise. So you start the count when the sun is rising, right? And the monarchs are going to be hanging out typically by tall plants near water. At other overwintering sites, it's kind of like there's not a lot of water at a lot of overwintering sites, but they'll be on the side that catches the first rays of sunshine and typically blocked by wind. I would say here it's more important that they're just the tallest plants over the creek. And they're sometimes in the desert beyond the creek too, but not very far. And it's the edges of plants. You're kind of looking through the silhouette of the creosote or mesquite or willows. And you're either going to be looking for clusters, that's like 2 to 5 monarchs typically at Saline Valley. Loners, they're like by themselves, and most of the monarchs are loners. It kind of sounds sad. It's not, I promise. And then there's sunners that are like hanging out, like basking in the sun. You count each individual monarch in Saline Valley, no counting in clumps. And you're going to note the species that they're overwintering and clustering on, and then try to like make observations about nectaring plants, what you're seeing that's also in bloom. And that can be challenging. So we have tools. So Jepson E. Flora, for those of you curmudgeon botanists, uh, Jepson has switched over to the E. Flora. They are no longer making another book. They don't have to organize all the like cat herders organize all the botanists to submit their floras and such like taxonomic revisions. Now it's all on the website. And Keybase, which is like one of my superpowers. So you basically like click on which region of California you're in, and Keybase will make a specialized flora for you just based on that region. It's like it's like the Desert Gypsum, which is like such a good book, but like now you can make like a super specific one. I like this blows my mind. If it doesn't blow your mind, I'm sorry, but like Keybase is that good. So just try it out. Even so, you're gonna click on which region of California you're in, and it'll give you all the families, genera, and species that are in that region. And it'll make like a dichotomous key based on artificial intelligence of like it's like simpler than the Jepson. So instead of having all these like traits, it'll just have like 2 or 3 traits based on the species that are in that area. It's incredible. You just gotta go try it out. Other than that, if you're like, "Whoa, that sounds like way too much," download iNaturalist. And so I'm obsessed with iNaturalist. I talk about it all the time. I have what am I at? 7,539 observations. I'm probably more than that now. I am on iNaturalist so much. And it's because of how much faith I have in it. I teach it to people. I think it's great for students. It's great for elderly people. Everyone should be on iNaturalist. You take a picture, you upload it, hopefully 3 to 5 pictures. You upload it onto iNaturalist, and an artificial intelligence algorithm will identify it, but also community members. There's an expert on Malva that will always, if I post a mallow, they will always comment on it and tell me what species they think it is. And it's often not what the AI thought it was. Um, and there's so many examples of that. I was in a fight with a scorpion expert in China, like that she looks at all the scorpions in California. So like there's experts that just hang out on here and they'll give better IDs than basically people in the region you're even in sometimes. And there's like some botanists in Bishop that are hanging out on iNaturalist too, and they give really good IDs for a lot of stuff. Some of maybe some people even in this room. But here's all my monarch observations. I will upload stuff from overwintering counts. I'll upload it on iNaturalist too. So not just on Survey123, but I'll also upload it on iNat because it goes into the Western milkweed mapper, Western Monarch milkweed mapper, which is a big project. So if you find milkweed, if you find monarchs, join this project. It'll get auto-populated onto there. I was tied for some of the most species of milkweed. Um, yeah, grow milkweed plants is way higher than me. Go figure. But you can join iNaturalist in this project through that QR code. Seriously, if you're not on iNaturalist, your data is used by scientists. You are helping move science forward. You are helping entomology, botany. Not a lot of birders are on iNaturalist, and it's a little bit of a sore spot for me. But if I can claw you away from eBird and get you to be posting your observations on iNaturalist, that'd be great. eBird's cool though too. Okay, so now the most exciting part of my talk. Native, and I should move this because I want the title to be readable so you can take pictures if you need to. Oh, stop it. Can you get rid of that banner? There is a way. Okay. And I'll mention the honorable mentions myself. Um, okay, native plants to plant to support monarch butterflies, as found on iNaturalist with monarchs nectar feeding in Inyo and Mono County. So these are plants that, through my research, I've seen monarchs feeding on them. So if you want to attract monarchs to your yard, other than the obvious one, which we'll talk about last, these are the plants that are going to do them. And so the main groups that you have are, and I'll go through each one individually. So you have Asteraceae, which are like sunflowers, okay? Ericameria, rabbit brush. It's not even funny how, that's why it's my first one, pictured right there. It is not even funny how much this is the number one plant, rabbit brush. You may be thinking, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. Why do I need to plant it? It's probably not, maybe it's not in your neighborhood. But it will draw monarchs. And so next is Helianthus, which are sunflowers, Symphanotrichium, which are mountain asters. This one depends on where you live. If you're in a desert, I would say this is appropriate. Bulgaria canescens, desert sunflower. Sericium, which is thistles. Super, so good for so many pollinators. And then again, depends on where you are. Probably not appropriate for mammoth or bishop, but Baccharis, which is coyote brush. Okay, and then we have Lamiaceae, which are mints. So we have coyote mint, or a ton of other names, Monandinella, okay? And we have mentha, which is mint, but there are native mentha. So most mentha are going to be non-native, but there are native ones, and they attract monarchs. Another one, Sidalcia. Whatever, it's in a different family. Didn't want to lump it. It's checker blooms. And then honorable mention, which is being covered by the banner, is just water. It's just having like water features. And that can be like a bird bath, as long as it has like little stones on it. And also populus, cottonwoods, and salix, which are willows. Okay, let's go through this. And notice here on the Cal Flora profile, you'll see what times of month it's blooming. Your yard should be blooming all year. From like March to October, your yard should be blooming. And you can use CalFlora and CalScape to make sure that's happening. I mean, a lot of things are dying in October, but rabbit brush is still around. Okay, so biggest group, rabbit brushes, Ericameria. What I like, and it depends on where you live. If you're in a drier area, you're gonna have different rabbit brushes. If you're in like Mammoth and Bishop, you're probably gonna have Ericameria and nauseosa. And you can have different species that bloom at different times. Here's one green rabbit brush. Is it in Chrysothamnus? There's also a group of rabbit brushes called Chrysothamnus. Does it really matter? No, to us it does. Um, you could also pick from some of them too. But look at Calscape, look at Calflora when things are blooming. These plants, seriously, this shrub is like my number one for attracting monarchs. Then we have the sunflowers, which a lot of people do in Bishop. The most popular is Helianthus annuus. You see them all over 395. And less common is like Natalii. But it just depends on where you live. Siphonotrichium, the mountain asters, really common around Mammoth. That's where I was seeing a lot of the monarch iNaturalist observations. Check it out. There's a bunch of different species, and they have these really cool, like purple flowers, ray flowers. They're just really beautiful. And then this is more if you're in the desert, which I don't know how many of you here are, but Baccharis attracts a lot of monarchs, not only as habitat, but as a pollinating source, as a nectar source. And then the desert sunflower, the Garrya canescens, which is super beautiful. But again, they require drier conditions. And I just like, I do get worried about people planting landscaping that becomes escaped. And now you have a native, non-native plant in a region. Encilia farinosa in Los Angeles comes to mind of a native, non-native. Okay, Sericium. Thistles. So a lot of non-native thistles are attracting monarchs too. There are quite a lot of non-natives that are attracting monarchs, but these native thistles, super beautiful. You could have something blooming in your yard all year, from like basically from April to October, different thistles in your yard blooming. Depends on where you live and what's available. Seed sources are available, but so many exciting species of thistle to choose from. Okay, so now we're at mints. We have the coyote mint, Monardella. Why is it such a tongue twister for me? Coyote mint smells super pennyroyal, so it smells super beautiful, amazing. Probably why monarchs are so attracted to it. It attracts a lot of pollinators. If you're kind of getting that hint from these species that I'm showing you, I'm trying to attract more than just monarchs here. I'm trying to attract native bees, I'm trying to attract other butterflies and moths to your yard. Super cool that we all care about monarchs, but like species like these are going to be habitat builders for a lot of things in your yard. Other mints, mentha, things that you can dry and make into teas, right? Mentha canadensis and Mentha arvensis, both native to the state of California. Really pretty flowers as well. And I saw monarchs on mentha, which was exciting. And then checker mallow. We have like a rare one here. I don't even think you can get it at a nursery or anything, but this one's pretty common at nurseries. You can check on Calscape which nurseries have Sidalcia, checker mallow. But I was seeing monarchs using them. A lot of pollinators use this plant, so it's a super good one. Again, honorable mentions: bird baths, water. Like I suspect monarchs prefer the sound and chemical signature of moving water, but if you have a clean bird bath, I think that's good enough. Uh, and then just habitat building, Populus fremontii, cottonwoods, or whatever species of cottonwood is more locally native. And then willow. Depends how much space you have and like what species is locally native. But this one was being used at Saline Valley, the Salix goodingii. Um, Doug Ptolemy talks a lot about willows and cottonwoods in his books because they attract hundreds of different species of moths and butterflies. The caterpillars love eating the leaf tissue. And when you bring the insects to the yard, you bring the birds to the yard. And so building habitat, like in foliage, not just in flowers, but in foliage, is going to bring birds to your yard. And so beyond monarch butterflies, which use these plants, this is about birds. Isn't it always about birds? Okay, now milkweed, right? The thing that I like refuse to talk about. Um, yes, milkweed's important for monarchs and you should plant it in your yard. Use Calscape to figure out which milkweeds are locally native. Calscape is a CNPS website, California Native Plant Society website. You can check which nurseries have it. You can see blooming periods. You can see You're like, I only want to plant things in my yard that are like low water, which is crazy in Bishop. We have so much water. Um, Special uses, soil drainage, ease of care, attracts wildlife. You can pick different types of butterfly that you want to bring to your yard, and Calscape will tell you what plants to plant. It's a super powerful website. So do that for milkweed. But why didn't I want to talk about milkweed? Um, it's because it stimulates sexual behavior. And I just spent a really long time talking about a period in a monarch's life where they're not doing that. They're just kind of hanging out and nectar feeding. But monarchs are engaging in territorial fights and sexual behavior in the overwintering period. People are seeing it in Owens Valley, and they're definitely seeing it in the coast of California. So it does happen, but it is a period of sexual diapause. And the reason why milkweed is, again, so important is because the larvae need it to survive, and they pass on the poison to the parents, which is why monarchs are toxic. So here's different species of milkweed that, if you're in a drier area, the desert milkweed, Asclepias erosa. Durham said in 1978 he saw one at Hunter Canyon, which is really cool. And he saw dead caterpillars beneath it. So they must have died in the frost, like when it got really cold in temperature. But there was like frass, like poop around it. So they were feeding on it. So it was at an overwintering site in an inappropriate time of year. But I didn't see any milkweeds there when I was there. So perhaps the population has left that area, or maybe it's just not where we were. But the some most populations do. There's like a ton of caveats to that, and we can like talk about it one on one if you're interested. But Asclepias fascicularis, narrow leaf milkweed, that's the rock star of the show. Definitely everyone in Bishop should be planting that species, and it's like basically a weed in Bishop. It's pretty cool. And then Asclepias speciosa, it's used less frequently by monarchs, but monarchs are definitely still feeding on it, and that's showy milkweed. Super beautiful. I have a few in my rental unit. Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed it. I'm a wandering ecologist on iNaturalist, Richard Rockman. I'm not on social media. Proudly, it's terrible. And then there's my email if you have like questions or want to collaborate or talk further. And that's Franklin down there. Yeah. Anyhow, thank you so much. Yes. Yeah, so a lot of those are called oleander aphids. Uh, they're a non-native species of aphid that came over with oleander plants. In the same oleander's in the same family as milkweed. I think that's true. Yeah. 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 Um, So, wash it off. Grab a hose, spray your milkweed plant. Is it killing the plant? Probably not. There's like a threshold, right? Of like if a plant is covered in aphids, then you have Argentine ants and other ant species that are defending and using the aphids for honeydew, and they're attacking the monarch caterpillars, right? Maybe. Um, there's gonna be a lot. They like take them off the plant, right? So there's gonna be a lot of really crazy ecology that happens on your milkweed plants. Let it happen. It like people email me like freaking out about like, oh, this predator, this fly, this one fly is like hunting monarchs and like laying eggs inside. I was like, that's what they're. You're just letting nature happen. Like there's predators, there's prey. It's fascinating. It's lions and gazelles. Like, stop trying to control everything. Just let. It's a little different with invasive species with oleander aphids. I could see why people are like annoyed, but they're basically naturalized at this point. Like, I don't think there's going to be a huge government effort to get rid of them. Um, so just spray your plant, I would say. And that's natural. Not that like things that are natural or ethical are good, but like that's fine. I think just like I do that with my milkweed plants. I just spray them with water and it works pretty well. I don't put any like chemicals or anything on them. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Probably. Cool. Yeah.
descent from a plant or descent from ancestors?
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Like, you don't know, or
There. Okay, so milkweed has a chemical in it called cardiac glycosides, which makes it toxic for us. People eat milkweed parts. They do it very specific ways. They process the plants a lot. Mostly milkweed's used in like making baskets and textiles and stuff. But there's a lot of toxins in them, especially the cardiac glycosides, and that's what gets imbued into the monarch themselves. They can sense it in their environment. So that's why monarchs show up at milkweed patches. They're sensing this chemical in the atmosphere and they're able to fly to it. They're probably doing this with nectar feeding plants or nectar plants too. So maybe there's chemicals or visual signals. So monarchs can also see in a much broader visible spectrum than mammals can. So they're seeing things in the UV spectrum. They're probably not seeing certain colors that we can see, but like for the most part, they're seeing more colors than we can see. So they're not only sensing things about their environment on the chemical scale, but on the electromagnetic scale as well, especially in the magnetic poles of the Earth. They're somehow able to sense. Do I think they have like an intellectual understanding of them? Probably not, but they definitely have a way of sensing them that we can't comprehend. Yeah.
on the last question, what has anyone studied what that ancestral thing might
Think people, yeah. So like, why do they go back to the same overwintering? People are working on the genomics of them. There's a professor at CSU Fort Collins, uh, Dr. Chris Funk, who's working on genomics of especially like the difference between residential and migratory monarchs. Um, but that question of year after year, like, is it the same gene pool that's coming back? Like, is it their great grandchildren that are coming back to that roosting site? Um, so we still have a lot of work to do in that realm because we need to like link a lot of populations together. Because essentially, in that year, there's been like I'll just give you a fake population. It started in Los Angeles, then it went to Owens Valley, the next generation, and then the next generation after that was in Nevada, and then somehow the last generation made it to Boise, and then it flew all the way back to Los Angeles. If that's the case, I don't know, but is it going right back to Los Angeles, or is it because its great grandparents were there, or is it going to Santa Barbara? So just because the wind direction was different that day, or something. Um, yeah, that, folks are working on it. There was a question back there. Oh, yeah,
well 5 or 6 months like all on a rabbit brain. And when you said that the April springtime would be the time to see monarchs, I'm wondering why, because rabbit brush isn't necessarily
totally. But there's other plants that are in bloom.
with the milk.
You're right, but we don't need milkweed to be in bloom. Monarchs are actually pretty bad at pollinating milkweed. So milkweed has these like big pollen sacs called pollinia that get stuck on. It's really sad. You can see like Western honeybees are so maladapted to milkweed they die if they get a pollinia stuck on them, or they get stuck in the milkweed little holes in the flower parts. They'll get a leg stuck and die. If you watch a tarantula hawk, like a very large wasp, they're experts at feeding off of milkweed, and they will carry around the pollinia and then they'll bring it to another flower and successfully deposit it. Like so, larger insects are quite good. For some reason, monarchs just aren't very good at like doing that. There's better insects, but they are attracted to the leaf material. So you are getting leaf material in I think you're still kind of right. It's not until like May, June, and then by July you have flowers and stuff. Maybe I'm a little off, but not by much. But there's other plants, and so what you're seeing is not only monarchs that are flying through into Owens Valley throughout the entire March to September period. You're probably having generations that are born here, and then you're probably having generations that were born either close by or farther away and then coming here. So, which generation of monarch that are ending up at which time of the year in Owens Valley, it's really hard to say, right? I suspect a lot of monarchs are born in this area, though. We have a lot of milkweed, and people are posting baby caterpillars and stuff on iNaturalist, so they're definitely being born here too. Yeah.
Starlight. Very good, thank you. The Owens Valley almost always hosts monarchs during rabbit brush season, and I saw approximately 2 dozen flying together at 6,000 feet on October 19th. Do those fall monarchs tend to head west to the coast or east to Saline Valley for the winter?
I was just talking about this. I'm like trying to figure out like a spatial model to kind of include like streams and rivers and topography from Owens Valley, kind of like eastward. What we suspect is monarchs in Owens Valley are just flying out and then going into the desert and then going to like either Ventura, Los Angeles, or Orange County, maybe even San Diego County or Baja California. Um, the population really trails out by Baja California. There's only a few dozen that go there. But they're there. And then they're in San Diego and they're in Orange County. There's not a lot, but they're there. Los Angeles doesn't have that many, but at peaks it'll have a few thousand. Right now the numbers are not good. But Ventura County usually has a lot, like tens of thousands. So that's probably where most of the monarchs are ending up, is like around Ventura County. I don't think we need more tagging to figure this out, but we suspect that the monarchs aren't going from Owens Valley to Saline Valley. We think what's happening is they're going from Nevada into Saline Valley. That's like topographically would make the most sense, and with like streams. There's a few canyons that like in valleys that are pretty easy to understand, like wind patterns traversing into Saline Valley that way. It just doesn't make all that much sense to go over North Pass. Um, Unless like it's in September or August, unless they're in a car, unless Durham brought 300 over to Saline Valley. Um, it is not easy to get from Owens Valley to Saline Valley. So more data is needed, and perhaps I'm totally wrong. But I suspect they're coming from more central Nevada or western Nevada. But yeah, cool. Yeah. Do I have a picture of that? I mean, I have like the picture of Rachel. Let me like go to that. Do. Okay, so like Rachel's tagging monarchs in this picture. She puts a little sticker on them. It's just a little circle. And I have a picture from the Biono wetlands in Santa Monica. Someone took a picture from their binocular of a monarch that was in a eucalyptus with a sticker on it. And then they reported it, and then Xerces Society and California Fish and Wildlife figured it out. Oh my gosh, that was in Utah. Um, so someone, yeah, so someone captured a monarch, put a little sticker on their wing, and then it's like, yeah, they're really little. But like, with binoculars these days and like all your fancy bird cameras, yeah, we can work together to get that number. So they're like working on that. So like GPS units are in the works. Little
On our phone so we could track them when people
On the East Coast.
on the okay.
Side up.
I think a lot of that technology is going to be coming to us soon. And Stu definitely wants to be tagging monarchs. So I think by next year, hopefully we'll have training for people. We can practice on Doritos all together. I had a bag of Doritos for this year, but no one wanted to take me up on a training session. I was all ready to go to Central Park or whatever, the Bishop Park, and by the garden, and I had a plan and everything. Hot glue Doritos to a branch. But in the future, and then we can like by the time we get to Saline Valley, we'll all be experts on tagging monarchs. Any other question? Yeah.
Native plants. What is native, non-native, or non-native native?
Yeah, so a native plant is a plant to a region. Okay, so like, are we talking the state of California? Are we talking Bishop? So I'll talk just about Bishop, right? So we have plants that are native to Bishop. They're indigenous to this area. They could also be indigenous to the rest of Inyo County. They could be indigenous to the rest of the state of California. And then sometimes in Western United States, we even have some species of plants that are like basically all around the northern hemisphere. Um, it depends, but even then you could get even more specific and be like, well, the population of this mentha in Bishop, even though it's the same species as the one in Norway, its population genetics are so different that like it's worth conserving, and you should not plant that Norwegian mint in Bishop, even though it's the same species, because it potentially you could be polluting the gene pool with a non-native population. But in terms of species, um, it's a species that's indigenous to a specific region, and how what that specific region looks like is different to everyone. And now a non-native plant is a plant or an animal or like it could be definitely an animal that is brought into a region usually by people. Sometimes on our shoes, sometimes we intentionally let them go, and they can be considered invasive species if they have a negative effect on an ecosystem. Most non-native organisms have a neutral to a negative effect. I, if you can think of a positive effect a non-native species would have, you'd blow my mind. But like most things tend to be, oh, there's so many downsides to eucalyptus, but maybe this is the wrong talk to be bringing that up. We need eucalyptus for monarchs. That is so sad to say, but like, but that's an example of a non-native invasive species that you will never be able to get rid of because monarch butterflies use it. There was a lot of non-native plants that monarchs were using, and I wasn't going to include in this talk. One example is Robinia, pseudoacacia. They are feeding on the flowers. Oh, they were on so much tamarisk. They were feeding on so much tamarisk. Um, so it's possible, right? Is like the thing about non-native plants is they're non-optimal food source for insects they're feeding on them, for birds that are using them as habitat. But people are going to come out with really cool studies soon about like these novel ecosystems of tamarisk, of black mustard, of cheatgrass, and animals and plants coexisting within them. It's just a sad reality that we can't get rid of these things. They're on the landscape, they're being utilized. It's suboptimal habitat, suboptimal food. Um, I don't know until we can get rid of cheatgrass. I don't. If anyone has the answer, that'd be great. You'd probably win a Nobel Prize. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah. That's a really good point, right? The more volunteers, the more potentially the more precise our number is. But what about the experience level of the volunteers? Because not all you're all special, okay, but not all but but not all volunteers are equal. Some are more experienced than others, and some are like I have an insane ability to count monarchs and like find them in weird places. But that took like years of work. Some people are going out for the first time and they don't know what they're looking for. Okay, and so then you have the amount, how long is your survey period? So you could be out there for 2 hours, you could be out there for 15 minutes. You should be out there until you're exhaustively done the survey. Um, yeah. And so there are statistical models. If you get more into statistical modeling, which can be super fun, there are models that deal with this kind of effort and sampling bias, and they're super interesting, really common in wildlife ecology. Not something I deal with as much, but you know,
Numbers, right, for actually for volunteers, like they have that graph, and that's the question is like, well, are people not counting them? And it's like, no, more people are counting them now than ever. Maybe not in St. but
right. Yeah, I do think in certain areas, like if you're in like Santa Barbara and you have 4 volunteers, your numbers probably aren't that accurate. Um, but in Saline Valley, like we extensively searched, even with 3 people, and we had right, and it's myself, two biologists, and Bart, the extraordinaire over there. We were able to do a lot, and most of like even the choked out parts, the choked out parts with too much vegetation now, which I'd like to mention like harkens back to the importance of indigenous stewardship because they were probably managing these canyons like a lot better than we were. But there's very few tamarisk there, so someone cleared all the tamarisk out of there. Yeah, that was great. I found a few babies, but not a lot. Right.
Because the hurricane, the elements of a hurricane closed all the roads, and so there is one year that I think that nobody,
Yeah, we've definitely had years in which no one was doing it.
but
It's, I mean, these like these spaces are the years in which we were having no one do counts, and
just a few years ago, I mean, the roads were all closed during the season.
there's quite a few spaces in there. What is the elevation of Saline? I don't know. That seems Google. Yeah, they're about there. They're like pretty. It's not the basin. It's not the valley floor. It's like up in elevation in the canyons, but it's not that high, right, Bart?
It's in 2000.
Yeah,
No, less than 2,000 feet above sea level.
yeah. This is weird for an overwintering site because a lot of the overwintering sites in the coast of California, the monarchs will stay until like February. Here they're leaving before that, and we don't know where they're leaving to. Or there probably won't. Yeah, most of the time there's like in Durham's data, he was saying there was no January numbers. But we want people to go in October and we want people to go in January. We want those early season counts and those late season counts. We don't know what's going on. We don't know where they're going. We don't know where they're coming from. Um, and Durham worked on it for a very long time. Um, and his notes are super fascinating. Now, again, if you're interested, let's talk and maybe you can help analyze some of his notes. So, uh, we can do it, yes. We have volunteers that are with California Fish and Wildlife, and so permit wise, that's totally possible. We have in the past. This year we did not. Um, I don't know. CDFW should be there now. I don't know if they're tagging now, but Rachel was doing it. She had a permit though. Yeah. Yeah. And like, um, there's the previous coordinator, volunteer coordinator in Orange County, Bob Allen. He's been tagging monarchs since like the 60s and 70s in San Juan Capistrano. Um, Bug Bob. He's so cool. He's got like a big red beard. He called me Mini Bob. It was great. Uh, but he's been doing it, and I think he's still tagging monarchs to this day. He teaches at I think Golden West Community College. But yeah.
Follow up, where you have them, like why would, if you have a volunteer group and you have a permit biologist, why are you not tagging them any place with them? You have to get a permit. That's what I'm saying, if you have a.
If we have a permit, oh, so like, so we're saying month of November, Saline Valley, Hunter Canyon. I think you can say a month, or if we had multiple permits, we can say Bishop in September, right? Because that'd be useful if we can tag in Bishop in September before they leave, either to the coast or somehow to Saline Valley. I think training is a big issue. Like I have a permit right now for rare plants, but I don't have a permit for tagging monarchs. I could get one. Like I also don't have any training on tagging. I don't really like touching animals. I like animals. I love animals, but like I study plants for a reason, so I don't have to like hurt them. Like you have to imagine tagging is super important, but you're also aggressively handling a very delicate animal. So having someone that's super trained, permitted, legally doing it, it's important. I don't mind getting trained to do it, and I would help do it. So let's keep that conversation going because I think tagging monarchs in Owens Valley and Saline Valley is very important. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Was that it for Zoom too? Okay.
You know,